4, 3, 2.
What's up, everybody? You guys already know you are now tuned into the Burnout Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Shelby. We are up here at S.STREET Media. And, I haven't done my AKAs in a while, so I'm your host, Rebecca Shelby, aka the Hot Takes Hottie, Miscontextuality, because what is life without context? AKA, I got my foot on these bitches next, which you already knew though. AKA the great debater, or like my good friend EJ likes to say, the great hater, because what could I say? And AKA the professional shit talker and the one and only poppin' provocateur. Let's jump right into it. So as y'all know, y'all girl love fucking movies and TV and all things black, and when those things come together, I go crazy. So today's episode is going to be about the Amazon Prime series Them. Now, y'all, it's been a while since I've done a movie breakdown, so I'm telling y'all right now, there will be spoilers. This entire episode is a spoiler because I'm going to break down my opinion on all the crazy shit that we witnessed. So if you did not watch them, I want you to click pause, go watch the series, come back to this video, like it, so that way when you come back to the video, you'll know where it's at, and then have a conversation with me in the comments. Let's get into it. Now, episode 1. We just gonna jump right into it. Episode 1. Before we get into like the trauma and everything else and what this movie's about, I want to talk about the cinematic representation of this movie. It was superb. A lot of times I notice when movies have darker skinned characters, the lighting on set doesn't capture the true beauty and essence of their skin color or like the true emotions on their face, because like they'll be shooting a scene at night with dark skinned characters with very scarce lighting or no lighting at all, and it's just like, how the fuck am I supposed to see if this nigga is scared, angry, mad, happy? Like how would I know? Like, y'all just can't be putting any old lighting on black people. Like Beyonce said, you cannot just be putting blue lighting on black girls. So I really enjoyed seeing that. I think oftentimes people kind of rush making movies when it's about, black people, and this doesn't feel rushed. So shout out to Little Marvin and all of the producers on this project, because you guys did a wonderful job with the actual capture of everything. It was very visually pleasing. Even though I'm not gonna lie, they had like 5 directors out. They had 5 different directors for each 10 scenes, and 4 of them was white, and the only black person was a black woman, which of course, girl, get your coin. But I found that very weird, like 4 white dudes like directing some shit about black people. But that's of course I'll have more critiques, but that's all for now. So after me jockeying the cinema, let's get into the first episode. So this takes place in the early 1940s, I want to say, because this is during the Great Migration era. And this is around the time Compton was white. So this is a very long time ago. And in the first episode, you see Lucky, who plays the mother character in Them, because this is a family movie. Well, not a movie for you to watch with your family, but a movie about a family. So mom and dad, 2 daughters, and they have a dog named Sergeant. Lucky is the mom, and I think that's actually a beautiful nickname, especially for a black woman, because you are lucky to be a black woman. But yeah. So right off the rip in the first episode, like they let you know like nothing about this shit is gonna be like puppy dogs and roses. Like this whole shit is gonna be fucking scary. And what I mean by that is we are basically our first image is kind of like what I thought was a flashback at first, but actually was a memory of some weird shit happening to Lucky. Then after the weird shit happened to her, we're introduced to this character and her daughter's book called Miss Vera. Now, let me tell y'all about this interaction between Gracie and Miss Vera. This is basically the catalyst of all of the demonic racism that they encounter, and also all of the physical racism that they encounter, because they're having a racist war between their neighbors and with these demons from the spirit realm, which I'm going to get more into. So what I think Miss Vera represents, because Miss Vera is a book that Gracie reads, and it's basically a book about how to be a mannerable little girl, which was definitely popular around that era, because you know, it was all about women pleasing men and being respectable and being a lady, that whole charade, which would make sense for a little Black girl to have a book about being a, you know, mannerable girl, because we have a lot of pressures on us in society to be the best. So Miss Vera is this character that basically becomes personified when they move from South Carolina to East Compton. When they get to East Compton, Gracie is basically lured in by this sound into the living room, and she's snatched by Miss Vera. And what I feel like Miss Vera personifies at this time, I'm going to get into it later on, but what I feel Miss Vera personifies at this time is the indoctrination process that young Black children go through in the American school system. It has been proven that charter schools in particular practice they practice a merit, and I've actually been a part of this system, so I can speak firsthand. They practice a merit and demerit system that basically makes Black children more docile and prepared to go into the workforce, into corporate America, to work for a white person, and to not question their superiors, to not self-express themselves in areas or in environments where white people are around, which is what I think Miss Vera is personifying. Gracie is very scared of Miss Vera. She feels like she has to be a good little girl who minds her teachers all of the time, and it's honestly kind of creepy to extent how obsessed Gracie is with this Miss Vera book. And it's kind of funny to see that it's kind of funny to see that whole spiritual and physical aspect of it all, because white people are like, oh, well, I didn't own a slave. Those were people centuries ago. Like, but my grandfather wasn't a slave master. And it's kind of funny to see that this family, in particular in this first episode, this little girl is literally being victimized by this racist demonic spirit. So moving on to episode 2. So after this whole thing goes down with Miss Vera, Lucky and her husband wake up. Lucky sees a scratch on her daughter's neck that only she could see at the time. At the time, we don't know that, but she sees the scratch. They start screaming, and Gracie is talking about their dog Sergeant being missing. She's like, Miss Vera took him, mommy, and they look for the dog all over. Her husband winds up finding him in the basement. Them thinking that there's still an intruder in their house. Lucky runs out into the middle of the street flashing her gun, telling the crackers in her neighborhood to stay away from her house. And I just thought that was beautiful because the day before, they literally made an entire spectacle of them being there. So I thought that was really nice to see a Black woman defend herself. But yeah, the dog having his neck snapped and being killed was like really super sad. And then in that moment, they kind of set up the stage for Lucky to be painted as this crazy Black irate woman, even though her neighbors are obviously tormenting her. So after this encounter, the girls go to school. Well, actually, no, Gracie doesn't go to school yet, but their oldest daughter, Ruby, who I'm going to talk a little bit more on later on, goes to school, and she encounters this female white devil that is, to me, the personification of what this European beauty standard does to young Black girls in America and how it affects their psyche. But we're gonna get into that a little bit later. Now, in episode 3, Lucky is warned by her Black family members about living in East Compton, and I find that very interesting because it seems like all throughout this movie, all of the Black characters, and there's not many, are constantly warning them about how crazy the white people are in East Compton, all of these things that they've heard, how white people are constantly driving Black people out of their neighborhoods there. And I just found it really profound because it's just like everyone seems to know what's up except for them. And nobody really wants to tell them exactly what's up. And I don't know if they even really know what's up, but just like all of the Black people seem to like something is not fucking right about them white people in East Compton. Now, and I'm breezing through the episodes, y'all, because there's a grander scheme of all of this I want to talk about, and we're going to get into it. So I didn't really write anything down for episode 4, y'all, because I didn't really feel like anything had changed from day to day. But basically Ruby and Doris, which is the name of the white devil, they have more encounters in school, and Henry basically loses his shit a little bit more, and I'm gonna get into Henry going crazy. So episode 5, and this is what I wanted to get to because this is ultimately the breakdown, which is kind of going to make this make sense. So in episode 5, they highlight the unfair real estate contracts that were strategically and exclusively given to Black, Hispanic, and pretty much minority homeowners that would ensure them to be in indefinite debt and eventually foreclosure when the time would come for them to, do what they always do, move us out these neighborhoods and put us up in a project somewhere, because who gives a fuck? And I like the breakdown of it because they give an actual visual representation of the mindset behind these white real estate and landowners. And there's a point in the meeting where they're presented with the opportunity to make the same amount of money without fucking over Black people, and they're just like, yeah, right. So it kind of just shows like white people do inherently look out for their own, even though they would like to act like they don't, they do. And I feel like to show that breakdown I feel like a lot of times online nowadays, we talk a lot about a lot of things without the context behind it. And it is very easy to say like, oh, why don't Black people have ownership? It's not this time anymore. Why this, that, and the third? And a lot of this is generational. Like, even if you do come from a family of Black people who owned a home, doesn't mean that you're safe from being fucked over by the man. Like, ownership means nothing if what you own isn't really yours. And I like how they kind of tied that in with the spiritual aspect of there being covenants on a lot of houses, basically saying like that, you know, nobody of Black blood could ever live there, and a lot of those covenants were broken. And I'm not saying that they should still be legal, but I do think I do like the way that was kind of tied in, because that is a historical fact. Like, there's a point in time where people literally put in their wills and leases that nobody Black was allowed to live there. And it's just like, you know, think about the type of person that had to, you know, type of hatred you would have to have festering within you to make a covenant so strong that land that you might not even be on, well, land that you're definitely not going to be on in the hundreds and hundreds of years to come, will never be inhabited by anyone but just white people. Like, how dare you? Like, how superior do you think you are? And in that covenant that is being broken, in the same episode, they reveal why the Emerys are actually forced to leave South Carolina and move to East Compton. Now, trigger warning, I'm about to be talking about rape and infantile murder, so just bear with me. Now, I actually really like the director's explanation as to why he chose to show this on screen. And I also like that they let a Black woman director direct this scene, because she did it with a lot of delicacy and care, and as much care as you can put into rape and infantile murder. But I'm actually going to read to you guys just a little bit of what he said, because I kind of had the same reservations. I heard a lot of people saying, oh, this movie was too traumatic, it was too triggering, that's why I couldn't watch it. And it's funny how we can watch trauma in the capacity of a historical context, because we feel like that happened to people back then. But we have a very hard time watching things in the context of outer worldly things, or different realms, or just like different perspectives. And he basically kind of touched on the same reservations I had, but way more profoundly and articulately. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it. So, after being, you know, asked, like, why would he include to show this? Like, why would he want viewers to see this? Basically, I'm just going to skim. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But he says, I could have told the same story as a documentary about redlining. I could have found one family and made a biopic. I could have, my bad, y'all. I could have made you, you know, a story about Jim Crow. That to me is just about going through the front door of history. And it wasn't particularly interesting in that. I wanted to creep around the back door of the house, bust open a basement window, and let myself into the basement level of history where the darkest, most frightening things live. And I gave you that crime in a way that you've never seen it before. If this was a slave narrative, if it was a piece of police brutality, it allows your brain, I think, to put it in a safe space. Oh, I've seen that before. I know what that is. Yeah, you never seen this before. And so in a way, what I think that does, it brings the viewer a bit closer to the treachery and the true sickness of the heart of the Jim Crow experiment. Now, by him saying what he said, basically it kind of put things into perspective for me, because it's like we're very comfortable with seeing the whole 12 years of slave narrative, the white slave master busting up into the slave house and raping the slave master, and we all know that's where light-skinned people come from. But or we're very comfortable with seeing things like When They See Us. We're very comfortable watching white men beat up on black boys and berate them and coerce them and play on their psychology and intelligence. But when we sit down and watch things that could have happened just in a non-fictional context, it's more disturbing because it's strangers. And I think that's really what disturbed people with seeing Lucky be held down and raped, and then having to watch her child be murdered by a white bitch. I was about to say woman, a white bitch, and two fucking white devils. That makes people uncomfortable because they're strangers. And the thing is, yes, strangers did go around and have organized attacks on civilians. Like, that did happen. A random white man and his friends, if they got drunk enough, they go in there and do anything to a black person. And I think that in this article that I was reading from is from the Griot. He did a sit-down interview with them. Check it out. It's actually really good. He says that this show is a depiction of what this time was, which was basically, he says, I think it's the time we call the Jim Crow South, but it has always been what it is, domestic terror regime, which I 100% resonate with. Like, the Jim Crow South is not just some cutesy little, oh, we put laws in place to fuck around with black people. Sorry. Like, it was a domestic terror regime, and civilians, police officers, governors, and any white man of any status at that time could just come in and do anything to a black person because we were seen as inferior. And when we downplay that part to just laws, it kind of makes what the people at that time, what they had to go through and endure, seem minuscule, and it's not that at all. So I like the duality of that episode. I thought it was beautifully put, showing that, you know, we do deserve better and we can have better, even though sometimes the grass isn't greener on the other side. When the coin is flipped against you, you just have to roll with the punches. So this is a perfect segue actually into episode 6, talking about the influence Henry Emery is under by this demon that is basically the personification of Jim Crow. And the reason why I say he's the personification of Jim Crow is because he's constantly taunting Henry, the black father, who is a professional. He's not the stereotypical black man at that time, be it working as a janitor or a busboy, which is nothing wrong with that at that time, because it's just like it wasn't many jobs to get. But Henry was fortunate and lucky enough to go to college and actually get a degree to be an engineer, even though he was still treated like a nigger. But in all of that, he's constantly taunted by this spirit of Jim Crow. Like, you know, he's kind of just like, yeah, we're cool. Like, we're cool. Like, he's influencing. He's kind of like a bad friend. He would influence him to say or do things or think perverse thoughts, like trying to influence him to murder his boss, or, you know, taunting him when he's being beaten by a bunch of white men. But the one scene that I found particularly profound is when they were sitting down in the diner. And he's telling him this story about the time his slave master cut off 3 of his fingers for taking some peaches that had fell and started to rot on the ground. So as he's telling him this story or whatever, he's like, you know, what do you think about that? Like, what would you have done? And Henry is like, oh, I would have did this, I would have done that, I would have told that cracker, da da da. And he's like, nigga, you wasn't doing shit. Just like that. Nigga, you wouldn't do shit. You wouldn't do shit. He's basically taunting him, basically telling him as a black man, no matter what a white man does to you, you're going to sit down, take it, and not question it because you don't have the authority or permission to. Basically telling him, like, as a black man, you have no power in this country, that you're inferior, you have nothing. And it was the constant taunting because his character, like, Henry didn't have the most demonic demon. Out of what everyone in the family was experiencing, like with Gracie and Miss Vera, or the mother and the old man, and we will get to him, I promise, or whether it be Ruby and the demon of the American Beauty standard, his demon wasn't the worst as far as self-destruction, but he was the worst in the sense where he was basically telling Henry the reality of his situation. No matter how strong or no matter how many odds you beat, at a certain point, you will be reminded that you are a nigga in America. And I think that reality is the most horrific. Like, it's the most scariest, right? Like, it doesn't matter how many degrees, PhDs, awards, how critically acclaimed you are. If you are a black person in America, that don't mean shit. Like, still could get pulled over, still could get killed, still could be talked down to, disrespected, made fun of, and just a whole bunch of bullshit that we endure on a day-to-day. No matter what status you're at, you will never be on their level. And I think that's the horrific part about that, because this is supposed to be taking place in the 1940s, and it's 2021, and it sounds more like a commentary on the times. Moving on. Now, this is when the movie started getting really weird. So, in episode 7, after being taunted by this Jim Crow character, Henry is persuaded into is basically persuaded into shooting a cop. And I'm just like, hold the fuck on. It is 1940 in an all-white neighborhood. A black man just shot a white cop 3 fucking times, and nobody ain't see it. Nobody ain't see that shit. Nobody fucking seen that shit. And it just was really weird to me, like, okay, so like for all that, like, you had to kill a cop. And I see this whole agenda that's being pushed in the media that black people are some type of cop killers, and it's like black people against the police. And it's getting really weird because it's just like, I know it's no black people out here literally beefing with the police. Like that just doesn't make no sense. Like, there are no black people out here gunning for the police. It just wouldn't make sense for our existence to start doing some shit like that at a consistent rate. But for some reason, it's being put into the media as if this is just an occurrence that happens. The my thing is, if a black person shoots a police officer, they definitely go get their ass. Like, it does not take them very long to figure out who did it and collect them and throw them in jail. So it's just one of those things I never really understood. And the fact that it was in this, I just like, that's really weird. Like, am I supposed to feel vindicated that he shot the police? Like, I didn't know how I was supposed to feel about that. Like, was the viewer supposed to feel like, yeah, like, we got a point? Because it wasn't given. Now, all right, so we kind of got into the whole Jim Crow aspect. Oh, sorry, y'all. It's just when I talk a lot, I don't know what it is. It makes me yawn, but I'm very interested in this topic. Don't think I'm bored with y'all. So, now one thing I will say is, all right, let's talk a little bit about the racist neighbors. So the fucking bitch Betty in this shit, her storyline was just so weird because it was like she was there, she was being mad racist, she was getting all of the neighbors together and shit like that to be racist with her and terrorize the black family. Like each day they were there, some shit happened. And it was kind of weird for me because then like all of a sudden like she got kidnapped by the milkman, and it just is like, okay, like what the fuck is this for? Then they kind of allude to like some type of sexual abuse that's happened to her, and then on top of that, her husband is like gay, and they don't expound on it at all. Like they only allude to it once, and that's it. And I'm just like, this is getting really weird. Like toward the end, it started looking like they tried to like jam pack and compile a lot of issues in one and rush the full product because it was just a lot of shit that didn't make sense as far as the storyline. Like all of the antagonists were literally just there to be antagonists. There was no point, there was no storyline. They're just very antagonistic. And then the attempt at the storyline they tried to get Beth was like really weird. And I wish we would have got more of an exchange between Beth and Lucky. Like Lucky did slap the shit out of her and I love that. But I wish we would have been able to see more. Like they didn't really get to like even the scene where Lucky is chasing one of Betty's friends' sons with a stick because he pissed on a white sheets, which is really weird because it's just like Lucky is literally running down the block chasing this little boy with a stick. And I get the times like it's 1940. But she has to try to explain herself. She don't yell, nothing. Like it's almost kind of like the entire time Lucky was inaudible. Like she only was able to say certain words or talk about certain things. It was really weird. Like everybody could talk. Like everyone could talk except for Lucky. I don't know. It was really weird. But moving along, and episode 8. So episode 8, matter of fact, there's a key thing I missed from episode 7. Now, episode 7, now I talked a little bit about Lucky's baby being murdered right in front of her face, right? So after watching that traumatic experience happen, of course, like any person would, Lucky kind of went a little bit crazy and they had to leave South Carolina. They had to go. So when they left, Miss Emery, Lucky, basically brought Chester, their dead baby boy's remains with them to their new house. And because of that, they try to charge her with reckless abuse of a corpse, but they wound up just putting her in the hospital because they feel like she needs like medical attention. But what I found profound about this is like they highlight how like the true horror in America is the healthcare system to Black women. Like the white doctor there totally disregards everything Lucky and her husband and children are saying, and she's just like carrying out her own agendas. Like she's just doing whatever the fuck she wanna do. And I don't mean to laugh like it's funny, but it's funny in the sense that this is still happening today. Like Black women are still being subjected to malpractices and being abused and killed by doctors and nurses at hospitals. So I just like, it was just crazy to me to see that because I'm just like, yo, this shit's been going on forever. Like since the beginning of time, like literally the hospital was built to kill Black women. So it was kind of like, how do I want to put it? It was like really, at first it started off really strong, but it got really weird because then she started getting visited by the old man, which is basically like the big white devil that is haunting the whole house. And like he's basically like cursing her out for not letting him drive her crazy to the point of her wanting to kill her whole family. And I'm just like, excuse you? Like, it just didn't make sense. Like a demon is sitting here cursing someone out in the psychiatric ward right now. Is he dead ass? And it just was like, it got super weird at that point. Now, episode 9 was basically the breakdown as to why the white devil became the white devil. And like we see that the dude, I think his name was Ep, he's like from this like migrant part of America around the time they freed the slaves. And they live in this like free religion town. They just all believe in God without any strings attached. I don't even know what the fuck that means, but like that's the way of their life. So this white couple, this black couple, their wagon breaks down. He sees them, and right before he sees them, Satan manifests himself to him as a child for him to raise. So he accepts Satan and goes to help the black family. And when he goes to help them, originally it's like he's at a conflict of interest because he feels like God is testing him. Like if he could be nice to black people, like he'll get into heaven. I'm just like, that's really fucking weird. But after they accept these black people, the black dude helps them find water so they can build a well. And all of these Germans thought like, oh, he's probably doing black magic. He's probably some type of voodoo priest, and they is being that's the white devil right there. Don't want me to speak. They were calling his wife all type of. They're calling the wife all type of like. There's a scene where the white women of the town are literally sitting there like, oh, because she was pregnant. They're like, oh, when you guys have babies, what do? Do they just get up and walk away like horses? And I'm just like, who the fuck talks like that to a pregnant woman? Like, are you fucking crazy? Like what? And after all of that, basically the nigga was like after all of the stuff that went down, like these people just started being like really weird and mean toward them. And he received some type of revelation that black people are inherently evil, and that's why God made them the slaves of the white man and all sorts of stuff, which are actual things that people have said to justify slavery. Like that's a real thing. Oof. Brought to you by cranberry juice. But like white people actually have used different scriptures before to justify slavery and encapsulating black people, period. So when he says all of this, they call a town meeting in the church, they burn the black people's eyes out. And the black woman is just like, you think you're so fucking righteous, but the only person that you serve is the devil. You don't worship God because God says to love all people. Basically kind of showing that even though they endured all of this, they were still righteous among a bunch of righteous idiots. And after she said all of that, the church burned on fire. And then the little boy who's the devil reveals himself as the devil. He sold his soul. And basically, that is the reason. That is basically explaining that East Compton was built on top of a satanic but also religious immigrants plot. And that basically like the souls that lived there were inherently racist, which when you think about the 80s crack epidemic, like seriously, when you really sit there and think about the crack epidemic and like movies like Boys in the Hood and Baby Boy and like all of the insidious shit that happened in Compton around the time black people was there, like it makes you think like, okay, when they got the white people up out of there, was it like, I don't want to say they karma, but like, okay, because the white ancestors or descendants were forced out of the community. Well, they weren't forced out. They left because they didn't want to live around black people. But because black people essentially made them leave, the curse of the land was like everything to happen after, like drugs and rape and murder and gang banging. Like think about it. A lot of shit in LA is the catalyst of the downfall of black culture, right? So it's funny that they chose to make this movie happen like in East Compton. So that was kind of like what I got from this. Like, was that the message? Like, because when I look at stuff like this, like I would see something like this being the catalyst to Snowfall, because Snowfall has a very dark element to it. And when they talk about the crack, it's almost like they're talking about an entity. Like when they're talking about crack taking over the black community, it's almost like they're talking about some demonic force that possessed people to start acting crazy. Because think about it, when niggas was on crack, there's killing one another for crack. The gangbangers that wasn't even doing the crack was killing each other about who could sell a crack. People was having crack babies, like the babies was being born with no eyes, not functioning right, or crying because it's addicted to crack. And that's best case scenario, that all the baby do is cry because it's addicted to crack. And it was just so much stuff going on. You kind of got to think like, okay, yeah, we know the government like incited all of this shit, but what other higher Luciferic entities were at play to make this happen so perfectly? Because, you know, I think back to the last episode in season 3 of Snowfall, when we see that Franklin would have inevitably worked with the FBI. Like even if he had went to college, he still would have got mixed up with the Reed dude, and he still would have worked for the FBI. We know at that time, black FBI people were usually used to infiltrate movements like the Black Panthers and gangs. And at that time, gangs were actually about community restoration. So it's kind of like, what other demonic forces are at play to make sure that certain characters are specifically placed in certain places at certain times to make sure that these things happen? Because it's like, okay, if it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else. If it wasn't this, it would have been that. So it kind of like, seeing that kind of put it into perspective for me, even though this is totally nonfiction and it's a horror series. It kind of made me go, So in the last episode, they basically like fight all of their demons, and at the end, they conquer the demons, but then they have to still fight the reality of their neighbors being white and racist and basically burning their house down. Like they literally burnt the fucking house down as they finished fighting the demons. But I was glad to see that black people didn't die in a horror film. And that is kind of my whole critique on this. I feel like the two things that really make this good is the cinematic representation and the fact that the black people ain't die at the end. But it's like, in all of that, I'm still kind of missing the message. Like I'm still missing like the connection, because there were a lot of things in this that didn't make sense. Like going back to Henry bodying a police officer. Like, first of all, before we even get to Henry bodying a police officer, Henry fully bodies some fat Chinese dude with the fucking Bay accent. And I'm just looking at this shit like, how as a black man could he do this in broad daylight? Like how? And that was never followed up on after he bodied the police officer. That was never followed up on. Like, and like that just doesn't make no sense. They literally took Lucky and put her in the psych ward, like right after we found out that she brought the baby across state lines. Like, we didn't even know that information, and now she in the psych ward. Like, when were the police called? Because before the police were even called, these 3 white dudes that live in their neighborhood was inside of their house whooping Henry's ass. So I'm just like, what the fuck? like there's a lot of shit in there that I felt like was really good that they should have expounded on more. Like at the end, when they all defeated their demons, well, not really all. Lucky, the black woman, and I thought that was super symbolic that it took a black woman to defeat everybody else's demons. And then she had to go fight her own. It's just like, and then nobody came to help her. Like, that was crazy. Matter of fact, I want to talk about Henry real quick as a character. Because throughout all of this, now we find out that throughout all of this, Henry was before Henry got his degree in engineering, he also fought in the Vietnam War. Now, no, he didn't fight in the Vietnam War. He fought in World War II against Hitler and the Jews and all of that good stuff. So we also found out that he fought in that war. He wasn't allowed to have a gun. Hoopla, hooray, this, that, and the third. He has a whole bunch of PTSD. Not to minimize his PTSD, but we got to move on because it's a lot to unpack. When we realized that part, like that sentiment, we realized that Lucky was kind of the one who helped him get out of that. But then when Lucky started going crazy after being raped and watching her child beaten and murdered by a group of white people, Henry is kind of just like, oh, like, just let her be crazy. Like, he's just letting her be crazy, like, just letting this shit go on. And then when they moved to Compton, he like, all right, Lucky, you need to get your shit together. And it's just like, nigga, what? I do like well, let me not say I like, but there was a scene, I don't want to spoil it too much, but Lucky literally gave him a piece of his own pie. Like, showing him, like, nigga, when you went through your trauma, I was there for you, and now I'm going through this shit, and you trying to make it seem like I'm some type of crazy ass bitch to all of these fucking white people. Is you stupid? But they wound up getting over that. But Henry's character was just very like, it almost kind of gave me like, is your commentary black men are the weak link of the community? Because that's what it was giving. Like, it was giving like, okay, it was a very matriarchal house in the sense of they had the two daughters and then it's the mother. And Ruby was super mature for her age, like super like intuitive and on point, right? And there was just something so, I don't want to say mature, but so adult about Gracie. Like, it's just like Gracie got it. Even though she still was childish because she was literally like 5, 6 years old, she still was very like, I know, like, I understand what's going on. And Henry was like the only person that couldn't get with the program. And the thing was, at first, I'm just like, okay, maybe it's because all of them got demons and Henry the only one who don't got no demons. When Henry got the sickest one, like, then when they showed Henry's demon, I'm like, hold on, this nigga going crazy too. Like, he gonna go crazy twice. But then, even after experiencing that, Henry is just acting like they was the only ones bugging. Like, he wasn't even going through none of this shit. So it was kind of giving me vibes like, what is the actual purpose of this character? Because he's literally only the man of the house in a traditional sense of providing, like, financially. Outside of that, though, like, Henry was just very much like useless. And that's kind of what Jim Crow told him at the end, like, you're worthless, like, you're worth nothing. Like, when your wife got raped, you was at the movies. And it somebody don't want me to say this. But I'm going to say it anyway. It was almost like they wanted to villainize Henry, but they couldn't because they would know how that would look to black audiences. Like, it was almost like Henry's character wasn't supposed to be good, but they knew if they made him bad, it would kind of fall into the trope of painting black men out to be like villainistic and, demonic. Like, it would kind of be like, okay, we have all of these white devils in this movie, and then you choose to make a black man the antithesis to it. And because they couldn't do that, his storyline kind of got weird. Like, it was like, do you like Henry? Or do you hate him? Are you just supposed to side-eye him the whole time? Or are we just supposed to act like this is not going on? But another thing I would have liked to see more of was the daughters. And both of them for different reasons. So I'm going to talk about little Miss Gracie. Because the thing is, even though the mother fought everyone's demons, Gracie was the only one who defeated her own and actually had to save her mama. So when her mother ran in there to save Gracie from Miss Vera, she got Gracie away from her. But ultimately, Gracie had to destroy the book to defeat Miss Vera, or Lucky would have died. And I found it very interesting how the youngest person of the family was the most powerful, because Gracie was the first person to see all of this going on. She was the first person to kind of get how to destroy this all of this stuff going on. And Gracie also was the only one that wasn't pussy. Like in the scene where the cops are harassing them and they got the father pinned up against the wall, they sitting there looking at family pictures and holding them. Gracie is like, like growling at the fucking police officer while all of them is sitting there shook, like, oh my God, officer, no. And she's the only one like, if y'all don't stop. Like, Gracie had such a very queenly presence to her at such a young age. And you see that she's very socially aware. Like, she knows what's going on. And like, I would have liked for them to build more on her character arc. Because I feel like they kind of only had her in there as like the sassy little black girl, but she was much more than that. Like, she literally was the star of the show. And I feel like they could have shown more of her experience. I feel like, honestly, she should have had like her own episode, or the girls should have had their own individual episodes, like about them both, but like, each 30 minutes. Going on to Ruby. I would have liked to see more of Ruby's experience of being an only black girl going to an all-white high school, because I feel like, even though like, it was super genius how they kind of played on like how traumatizing it could be for young black women to try to conform to a beauty standard they will never fit because they're not European. But I would have liked for them to show more. Like, first of all, she got kicked out of the classroom because her classmates were making monkey noises at her. And it's just like, after that, there was no follow-up. There was no nothing. It's just like, this is still a school. Like, so that was really weird. And then, like, I feel like the introduction of Doris was really weird, in the sense like, okay, so we had this white girl who's basically like gassing up her head like, oh yeah, you're pretty for a colored girl, or you're the prettiest colored girl I've ever seen, and this, that, and the third. But then, like, at the very end, when she has to face this demon, like, it's like a 380. Like, we don't, like, not 380, it's like a whole 360. Like, we don't really get to see the build up to the demonic side of this character. We just know that she's demonic because she's persuading Ruby to want to be more white, but they're not actually showing like the evil side of it. So I kind of, again, that's why I was like confused, like, why is it bad for young black girls to want to look like white women? Like, that's what was missing. Like, we know it's bad, but they didn't personify the horrors of it right enough. Because it kind of was like sad because that was like Ruby's only friend. And then she didn't find out that she wasn't even real until the very end when she was in her house and her mother came through and helped her fight the demon. So I don't know, there's just a lot of stuff in it that was very confusing also. But then there were also a lot of parts in it that I felt like was really good. Like, what else, y'all? I really enjoyed, like, at the end how they did beat, like, it was weird. Okay, so I like the fact that they beat the spirit realm, because the same way the black woman back then basically cursed the church in Compton and it burnt down to the ground. Lucky basically denounced Ep as a hypocrite and basically took away his eternity. So it basically annulled his contract with the devil. So I liked how they won in that aspect. But they didn't really win because then right after that, like, the cops in the whole neighborhood was literally out there looking like they was ready to lynch them. So it's just like they still have to go back into the real world, and it's just like they don't give you a pass in the real world for spiritual warfare. Like, they don't tell you that, oh yeah, you were just going through a spiritual battle, so that's fine, you could just go. So I found that really strange. And another thing I didn't kind of get, going back to like all of the black characters that weren't them, it's like all of them knew something was up, like they all knew the same thing, but they didn't want to tell them. Specifically when Lucky went over to Henry's family's house and Watts, it was like, okay, we get it, like, y'all don't want to live in the hood because that's where the white man wants y'all to be, so y'all gonna go live where y'all can afford to live in a white people neighborhood. I get that. You know, you bought it and you have just as much a right to live where they live. But in the same token, I don't understand what that was like. Like, I really don't get what they were trying to show that was bad about it. Like, they were happy, they had family, they didn't have to worry about crackers waiting outside their house to fucking take their head off. They didn't have to sneak out the back door of their lawn and shit like that. So it's kind of like, what is so bad about black people living in, kind of like, and like the white man's ice is not fucking colder. And I'm kind of tired of playing into that trope. Like, oh, like, we gotta fight to be around white people. Like, why we just can't fight to be in our own communities? Like, why we just can't fight to be right where we at and fight to make it better? Fight the daily struggle of being a black person in America right where we at. Because the thing is, the whole theme of these white people being upset was like, oh, why do you want to be somewhere where you're not wanted, where you don't belong? And it's just like, yes, they have every single right to be there, right? But I can't help but to think, like, what underlying projectors played a part in all of this, right? Because the thing is, when you step on white people's toes, they screw you over for your next generation. So you might think that the shit you going through is bad, and then you realize that, like, damn, it's even worse for my kids. Like, my kids got more stuff stacked up against them because of this shit. So I can't just help to wonder what other benefactors kind of help to come to play in it. Because then when we see, like, in the episode when they're breaking down, like, the laws of the land, in the literal laws of the land, in the realtor slash covenant episode, you kind of see, like, these group of white people, particularly Jews, got together and they made housing apartments and they put all this, and they strategically redline. Like, that's what redlining is. Like, this was the start of redlining. They specifically group black people and put them in these particular areas and hijack the prices for a specific reason. But I can't help but to think how many different, because then we see like, okay, the real estate lady is paying the cop to look out for black people. So he doesn't really want to look out for black people, but because there's a check to be gotten and him making sure the white people don't scare the black neighbors off too bad. It's like, I can't help but to wonder what other political warfares were going up in the, because that's just the bottom level. Like real estate people and policemen are like the bottom level of gatekeepers within the community. Like they know squat shit. Like the little bit of information that they know is not shit to do anything to anybody. So just imagine what was going on in like the Senate, the governor, like the senator, the governor, and like different people like that in California at the time. Because the thing is, it's all connected. Like the shit all goes up to higher power, right? All the way up into the US government. But I just can't help but to think like how many governors and senators in California at that time were most definitely racist. Like, what the fuck? Why can't my daughter live in Compton anymore? Why is she asking me for money to move? Because that was essentially the plight with Betty. Betty and her husband were one of the first white couples to move into East Compton. And you know, white people have this pillage and conquer and this whole like, you know, very idealistic of like unrealistic ownership. Like white people think because like they're the first people within 10 miles, they own that shit. And it's like you don't really own it, but you feel a sense of ownership because you're the first one. And it's really weird. White people have always been like that from the time they got off the Mayflower. But it's just really weird for me. So that was Betty's plight. Like her father was this super rich, high up dude. And then she came to him like, oh, me and Calvin, we need money to move because a lot of black people moving into the neighborhood and we're scared. So I can't help but to think how many other men in his positions, daughters were coming to them for the exact same reason. And how they might have endorsed other things coming into play in our communities. Because, like, it went from the police being paid to protect us so that way they could scam us and take our money and put us in debt to the police beating us up on our own lawn anyway. So it's like, niggas literally paid to get their ass whooped in the end. So it kind of brought a lot of stuff full circle for me. Like seeing that aspect of the Great Migration played out on TV was really interesting for me because I feel like a lot of times when we see films of the Great Migration, they talk about the Harlem Renaissance and Black business and Black pride. And I think that's beautiful because we don't talk enough about that. But it gave me a lot of context because it's like, okay, they kind of make it seem, and I'm not talking about as far as like in life, but when we look at media and the perspective of, Black Americans as a whole, it's like they freed the slaves, they they freed the slaves, there was sharecropping, then they had the Great Migration. After the Great Migration, like they had civil rights, and after civil rights, Black people lived happily ever after. And that's not necessarily the whole story. That's not true. So I think that to Little Marvin's point, it is very important to go through the back doors of history. It's important to really because the thing is, and I love documentaries, I tell y'all that all the time. I'm actually watching the Allen versus Pharaoh documentary right now. It's a really good one. I love to see why I don't like crime. But going through that back door of history, we have to start stepping outside of the same narrative that we're used to seeing in the history books. And we have to be more willing to accept that, because I think into tapping into multiple different truths hides a grander realization that this is much bigger than us. And I feel like the different pieces of truth build a bigger picture as to why Black America now is in the situation that it is in, and how we truly can free ourselves. But on that note, I feel like that is a beautiful way to end everything. That is my conclusion and synopsis on them. Overall, I give it, let's say, I give it a A minus. I give it an A minus because I feel like it definitely could have done a lot. It could have been a lot stronger as far as the consistency in the story arc and the continuity of everything. Like, there was a lot going on that just was fucking weird or just didn't need to be added, where I feel like another scene that would have progressed the story would have been in place, because there's a lot of unnecessary scenes. But it's fine, y'all. Overall, definitely support this shit. It's Black people all over it. Strong, beautiful Black cast. I think that's what made the movie bearable to watch. It was a beautiful Black family. And overall, yeah, just like anything Black, I pretty much support. Y'all know the vibes. So this is a great episode of the Burnout Podcast up here at S.STREET Media. As always, thank you so much for coming here and rocking with your girl. And we are out. I think I did a good job of breaking down the different stuff in that shit. Yo, my Clubhouse room's been flicking. Like flicking. But my whole thing is I kind of fucked up my own algorithm. I've been like, at first I was getting in tune with a lot of the people that doing like the real Black anarchist shit, like real Black power, not just that cookie cutter media shit. And then I joined one room about aliens. And now it's like I've been swooped into the wormhole. But literally last night I did a room with 140 listeners, and all of them just was listening to me talk about aliens. And I'm just like, bro, am I in the wrong business? Like, do I need a podcast about aliens? So the nigga I've been modding the rooms with and shit like that, because we have a great chemistry. And like literally at this point, everyone like people really come on the stage like, yo, like y'all rooms are amazing. Like, I'll thank you, Rebecca, Little Woke. Like, they be on it. So one dude was like, yo, like I would love to hear y'all content like as a podcast. Like I would love to like, he's like, I would love to be like on my way to work type shit, listening to y'all talk about this stuff. So I'm like, yo, if I have 140 people listening to me talk about aliens, I think I might actually,
fuck with it.
Yeah. I'm like, this is just something I was doing as a hobby, so y'all could listen to my other podcast.
I'm gonna do 3 pictures here, and we'll go to the 3 drawings. So.
Yeah, I did not know that. But then someone told me the T. They was like, yo, I'll be right.
We're going to try to keep going Sunday. Let's go.